He used my key to bring his lover into my villa, the villa I paid for, with the view I earned. And the sickest part? He had no idea I was just down the hall, in the control room, watching every move on a bank of high-definition monitors, sitting right next to her husband. It sounds insane, I know. It sounds like a movie script. But this was my life. Before that night, everything was perfect. Or, at least, Malibu perfect. I'm Maya. I'm the woman who built a software empire from scratch, right here on the coast. I'm supposed to be the one who has it all figured out. And Declan. Declan was my husband. He was the perfect accessory. He was handsome, charming, the ideas guy, the one who handled all of our investments. Or so I thought. Turns out, he was just handling my investments. We had the life. The glass house on the cliff, the charity galas where we'd smile for the cameras, the flawless, airtight facade. I worked so hard to build that life, and I really believed in it. I really believed in him. I built this fortress around us, and I trusted him with the keys. But for the last few weeks, something just felt wrong. You know that feeling? Like a low-frequency buzz you can't quite hear, but you can feel it vibrating in your chest. He was distant, always on his phone, always angled away from me. He'd kiss my forehead and tell me it was just stress about a new fund. The classic brush off, the classic gaslighting. I want to tell you how it happened, how the perfect life cracked open, and what I found crawling around inside. It's a lot. And it's the kind of story you don't tell unless you're ready to burn everything down. This is going to be a long, complicated story, and honestly, I could use a friend to get through it. If you want to hear how it all unfolded, how I found out, and exactly how we set the trap, you can follow along right here. That way, you won't miss what happens next. The first real crack wasn't a huge explosion. It was a whisper. It was a single, tiny vibration on a cool marble countertop. For weeks, I'd been living with the buzz, that awful, staticky feeling of wrongness. Declan was working late, which wasn't new, but he started coming home smelling of expensive wine, not the stress of spreadsheets. He'd touch my hair, but his eyes would be looking right through me, already focused on something else. He'd sleep with his back to me, and the space between us in that massive California king bed felt cold. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and he'd be in the library, the glow of his laptop casting a blue shadow under the door. He kept telling me it was the new fund, a huge deal he was putting together. He said it was going to double what I'd built. He had this way of talking about my money, my empire, as ours. I'd let him. I'd encouraged it. I wanted a partner. I didn't want to be the CEO in my own bedroom. I kept telling myself I was just tired, that I was projecting my own stress from the latest software launch onto him. It's so easy to believe the story you want to be true. It's so easy to ignore the red flags when you're standing inside the beautiful house they're attached to. Then came the night. It was a Tuesday. We were supposed to be going to a fundraiser in Santa Monica. I was in the walk-in closet, zipping up a dress, the kind he liked. He was in the master bathroom, steam pouring out, getting ready. His phone, the one that was suddenly always attached to his hip or in his pocket, was on the bathroom counter face down on the cold white marble. I walked in to grab my earrings, and as I reached for them, the phone buzzed. It didn't just vibrate, it skittered across the marble, a harsh, angry sound in the quiet room. I just froze. My heart did that stupid lurch. I didn't move to pick it up. I didn't. But I glanced down. The screen was dark, but the lock screen notification was lit up, bright white. Just a few words. Can't wait. See? My blood went cold instantly. See? Just see? My brain scrambled. Who did we know? Christine? Caroline? No, this felt different. Can't wait. The words were intimate. They were impatient. Just then, Declan came out of the steam, a towel around his waist. He saw me, he saw the phone, and he lunged for it. It wasn't a casual grab. It was a full-on panicked snatch. He grabbed it and flipped it over, his back to me, his shoulders tense. The silence was deafening, just the hiss of the steam from the shower. I tried to keep my voice light. I could hear the fake tremor in it. Everything okay? That looked urgent. He turned around and he was already smiling, but it was the wrong smile. It was the smile he used on investors, the one that didn't touch his eyes. "Oh, that?" He laughed. The laugh was too loud. "That's just Charles, the new investor from the East Coast. He's just aggressive. Wants to close the deal." He brushed past me, smelling like expensive soap and lies. My feet felt glued to the floor. "Charles," I said. "Yeah, Charles. You know, new money. No patience." He was in the closet now, his voice muffled as he looked for a shirt. I just stood there, staring at the spot on the marble where the phone had been. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating slow and heavy and cold. Charles. A man named Charles, signing off a text message with a single initial. C. A man named Charles saying, "Can't wait." It was such a stupid lie. It was such a lazy lie. And that's what hurt the most. It wasn't just the C. It was that he thought I was dumb enough to believe Charles. He thought the woman who built a billion-dollar company from code and caffeine couldn't spot a lie so thin you could see right through it. He thought I was just the wife, the pretty face for the galas, the bank. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was perfect, my makeup flawless. I was wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars. And I felt like a complete, total fool. I didn't say another word. I zipped up the dress, put on the earrings, and went to the fundraiser. We smiled for the cameras. We held hands. And all night, I just kept thinking about that C. That night, lying in bed next to him, pretending to be asleep, I knew. The buzz I'd been feeling wasn't in my head. It was real. It was a warning. And I knew, right then, that the perfect life I thought I had, it was just a perfectly constructed lie, and I was the only one who didn't know the punchline. I knew he was lying. I just didn't know how big the lie was. But I was about to find out. The next morning, I woke up, and the world was different. The sunlight hitting the Pacific Ocean looked the same. The sheets felt the same. But the air in the house was thick, unbreathable. I'd become an actor in my own home. I made coffee. I kissed Declan goodbye as he left for the office, his hand lingering on my waist just a little too long. It felt like a performance. "Have a good day," I said, and my voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from a long way away. He told me he loved me, and I just smiled. That smile was the hardest thing I've ever done. It felt like it was cracking my face. I spent the next 48 hours in a fog, going through the motions. I led a board meeting online. I approved a new wireframe for our next update. And all the while, a part of my brain was just spinning. Charles. Can't wait. See, I tried to get into his phone again. It was useless. He'd changed the passcode. His laptop, same. Suddenly, the man who used to leave his entire life open on the kitchen counter was a vault. And that's what scared me more than the text. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up. He was actively hiding things from me. I realized I couldn't do this alone. I was the CEO of a major company. What do I do when I have a problem I can't solve? I hire an expert. I don't get emotional. I get data. It felt disgusting. It felt like a cliche from a black and white movie. But on Thursday afternoon, I drove to a nondescript office building in a part of LEA. I never visited. I paid a man I'll call Mr. Jones a retainer in cash, enough to make him very, very focused. I didn't use my real name. I gave him a photo of Declan from our last charity event. I gave him the make and model of his car. "I just need to know where he goes," I said. My voice was firm, detached. I don't need the sordid details. I need facts. I need names, dates, and locations. Treat it like opposition research. Mr. Jones just nodded. He didn't ask questions. He didn't give me a look of pity, which I was grateful for. He just said, "I'll be in touch." The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I was living a double life. I was Maya the wife, making dinner reservations, talking about which wineries to visit in Napa for our anniversary. And I was Maya the client, getting sterile, encrypted text updates. Subject is at the Hotel Bel Air. Subject is at Nobu. Not alone. Subject is at a private residence in the Hollywood Hills. I told him not to send photos yet. I couldn't. Not yet. I just needed the final report. It came on Monday. Not in an email. A plain manila envelope, delivered by courier to my personal office, the one Declan never entered. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the long driveway, his engine fading into the distance. My hand was trembling. For a second, I couldn't open it. I thought, just throw it away. Throw it away and believe the lie. It's easier. It's a beautiful life. Just believe him. But I couldn't. The part of me that built an empire from nothing. She doesn't back down. I tore the flap. It wasn't just photos. It was a full-on dossier. And the photos. They weren't just sordid. They were happy. He was laughing. A real, genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. He was holding hands with. Her and her. I knew her. My heart didn't just sink. It evaporated. I felt dizzy. It was Chloe Sterling. Chloe Sterling. As in Marcus Sterling, the venture capitalist shark. The one man Declan had been obsessed with. The one he claimed he was aggressively courting for his new fund. Charles, he'd said, the new investor. I looked at the photo. Declan and Chloe, clinking champagne glasses on a private hotel balcony, looking at each other with an intimacy that made me physically ill. He was lying about C. He was lying about Charles. And he was definitely lying about the fund. This wasn't an affair. This was a... What was this? I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying. Marcus Sterling. Chloe Sterling? The fund. And then I saw it. An article from a month ago. A rumor about Marcus Sterling expanding his offshore holdings. It all clicked into place. The late nights, the secrecy, the money. He wasn't courting Marcus Sterling. He was. He was doing something with his wife. My nausea turned into ice. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a business plan. And I suddenly had the chilling realization that I wasn't just the wife being cheated on. I was the target. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there in my glass-walled office, looking at the photos of my husband and Chloe Sterling, and I felt quiet. It was the eye of the storm, the part of me that runs board meetings, the part that can look at a line of code and see the flaw. She just took over. The wife part of me went offline. This wasn't a marriage problem anymore. This was a hostile takeover. And I had been treating it like a personal betrayal. I looked at the name again. Marcus Sterling. The shark. Declan and Chloe weren't just having a fling. They were colluding. And if they were colluding, what were they colluding about? My money. His money. I needed to know the scale. I needed to know the depth of the well I'd been thrown into. And there was only one other person who was in this well with me. Getting Marcus Sterling's private cell number wasn't hard. I run a tech company. I have access to data. I found it in under 10 minutes. I didn't agonize over the call. I just did it. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was exactly what you'd expect. Sharp. Impatient. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice as cold and flat as his. My name is Maya. I'm Declan's wife. I have reason to believe our spouses are involved, but I don't think this is a simple affair. I think it's financial. Silence. A long, heavy pause. I could hear him breathing. What do you have? He finally said. A full report from a private investigator. Dates, locations, photographs. 1 hour, my office, Century City. The line clicked dead. I was there in 45 minutes. His office was on the 50th floor, all glass and steel, looking down on the rest of the world. He was standing behind a massive empty desk. He was not a warm man. He was all sharp angles and expensive tailoring. He didn't offer me a seat or water. He just said, "Show me." I slid the manila envelope across the polished desk. He opened it. He looked at the first photo, Declan and Chloe kissing at the Hotel Bel Air. His face didn't change. He didn't flinch. He just absorbed it. He looked at the next few, then pushed them aside. "You're right," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "This isn't an affair. It's a partnership." He turned to his own computer. "I've been suspicious of my wife for 6 months, but not about this." He typed for a moment. "About this." He turned the monitor toward me. It was a spreadsheet. Bank records, his bank records. Dozens and dozens of wire transfers. Small at first, then larger, all from one of Chloe's personal accounts to an LLC I'd never heard of. "She's been bleeding me," he said, as if commenting on the weather. Then he pulled up another file. It was Declan's new fund proposal, the one my husband had been stressing over, the one he was supposedly shopping to investors like Charles. "I've seen this," I whispered. "He wanted me to sign a power of attorney, to move my assets into this new structure. For tax purposes," he said. Marcus pointed to the screen, to the fine print at the bottom of Declan's proposal, the holding companies. Then he pointed to his wife's wire transfers. "Look at the receiving entity," he said. I looked, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was the same LLC. It wasn't two separate plans. It was one. Declan and Chloe weren't just sleeping together. They were working together. He was siphoning my money, and she was siphoning Marcus's, and they were funneling it all into the same goddamn pot. Marcus kept typing. He was in a system I didn't recognize, some deep-dive financial tracker. "They've been building a nest," he said, "in the Caymans, a joint account." He found it, the account name. He read it aloud, and I had to grab the desk to keep from falling. It was Villa Sol. It was the name we'd jokingly given our first tiny apartment in Santa Monica, the one with the one sunny window. It was our private name, our joke, the name he'd whisper when we talked about how far we'd come. He was using our memories as the password to steal my life. Marcus looked at me, his eyes like ice. They were going to drain us both, liquidate everything, transfer it to this, Villa Sol, and disappear. Leave us with the shell companies and the debt from their failed fund. They weren't just running away, they were planning to ruin us. The sadness I'd felt for weeks, the nausea, the fear, it all burned away in that second. It evaporated, and all that was left was a pure, cold, diamond-hard rage. I looked at Marcus Sterling, this man I'd never met, my partner in this bizarre betrayal. "They think we're collateral damage," I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. "They think we're the spouses, the fools. They think they're smarter than us." I took a deep breath. He used a memory of our past to fund their future. He's not just trying to rob me, he's trying to erase me. I met his gaze. They're about to find out they made a very, very big mistake. Driving back up the coast from Century City felt like floating. The rage I'd felt in Marcus's office had settled, cooling into something heavy and solid, like a block of ice in my stomach. I had the truth. I knew about Villa Sol. I knew it wasn't just cheating. It was a conspiracy. Now, I had to walk back into my house and pretend to be the woman who knew nothing. I had to become the greatest actress of my life. I parked the car, walked in the door. The house was quiet. He was in the kitchen, and the sound of him uncorking a bottle of wine, that soft, celebratory pop, felt like a gunshot. He turned around, and that smile was already on his face. The one that was all teeth. He told me he was worried, that I'd been working too hard, that he'd missed me. This was the test. I let my shoulders slump. I let the exhaustion I really felt show on my face, but I aimed it at the wrong target. I let him believe it was work. I told him the new software launch was a nightmare. I rubbed my temples, leaned against the counter. I made myself look small. I told him I was sorry I'd been so distracted, that I knew I'd been distant since that night. The Charles night. It was the perfect move. I watched the tension melt right out of him. He visibly relaxed. He saw the C text not as the loose thread I'd pull to unravel everything, but as a minor bump he'd already smoothed over. He thought I was a stressed, slightly paranoid wife, and he was the charming, patient husband. He thought he was in total control. He came toward me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me close. I had to fight every instinct in my body not to flinch. His touch felt wrong. It felt like spiders crawling on my skin. He kissed my forehead, and the smell of his cologne, the one I'd bought him, made me want to be sick. He told me he had the solution. He said I'd been taking care of everything for too long, and now it was his turn. He told me he was this close to finalizing the new fund, and that I deserved a real break. He'd already looked up flights. He suggested I go to a spa in Sedona. "Go this Friday," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Just unplug. For the whole weekend. You've earned it. I'll handle everything here. Unplug. Of course. He wanted me off the grid. He wanted me unreachable while they made the final transfers to Villa Sol. I pretended to hesitate. I told him it was a lot, that I couldn't just leave. Babe, you have to. He pushed. And he was so genuine, so convincing. Let me take care of you. And then, the slip. He smiled, that big, confident grin. He said it was actually perfect timing. He'd heard that Marcus Sterling was also going to be out of town this weekend. He said he'd heard Marcus was flying to Singapore for a big emergency meeting. My heart didn't just beat. It hammered against my ribs. He wasn't guessing. He knew Marcus's schedule, Chloe had told him. This Friday night was the night. The night both spouses were out of town. The night they were free. I kept my face perfectly still, just looking tired. I finally nodded. Okay, I whispered. You're right. I'll go. The relief that washed over his face was blinding. He thought he'd won. And like every arrogant amateur, he overplayed his hand. He laughed and said, Great. Oh, one more thing. My key fob has been acting weird on the side gate. Can I just borrow your master key for the weekend? Just in case I need to get in and out and it glitches. Another lie. Such a small, stupid, lazy lie. His key worked perfectly. I'd checked the system logs. He didn't want my key because his was glitching. He wanted my key because it was the master. The one that wouldn't send a notification to my personal app when he disarmed the owner-level security. He wanted the key that would let him bring her here into my home while I was unplugged in Sedona. They weren't just going to steal our money. They were going to do it from my villa. They were going to sit on my terrace, drinking my champagne, toasting to the fact that they'd fooled us all. I looked at him. At this man I'd loved, this man who saw me as nothing but a bank account and a fool. I smiled. A real, genuine smile for the first time in weeks. It felt amazing. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. I walked to the small safe in my office, the one he thought just held my passport. I took out the master key. It was heavy and cold in my palm. He kissed me, took it from my hand, and slid it into his pocket. He thought he was holding the key to his new life. He had absolutely no idea he had just armed me. He hadn't just given me the when and the where. He'd given me the how. And he'd just invited me to my own party. The moment his car was out of sight, I was on the phone. My fingers were steady. The ice in my stomach wasn't just cold anymore. It was sharp. Marcus picked up before the first ring finished. Sterling! He's sending me to Sedona for the weekend, I said. No hello, no preamble. This Friday, he wanted me to unplug, and he asked for my master key. There was a heavy silence on the other end. I heard a low, sharp exhale. It might have been a laugh. He told me I was right, that Friday was the day. He said Chloe had been a whirlwind of activity, booking flights, confirming details for his Singapore trip, all while he was sitting in his home office watching her. They're sloppy, he said, and his voice was laced with a contempt that was almost tangible. They're arrogant. They think they're the main characters, and we're just the boring spouses. They're not just arrogant, I said, pacing my office, looking at the photos of them still spread out on my desk. They're celebratory. He wants my key to bring her here. Then Marcus filled in the last crucial piece. He told me he hadn't just been looking at their joint account. He'd been digging into why this, why now, why not just ask for a divorce? It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. He'd found out that Declan, my brilliant ideas guy, had lost a fortune. Not just a fortune, a significant chunk of the seed money I'd given him for his investment firm 2 years ago. He'd made a series of bad secret bets and had been leveraged to the hilt, trying to win it back before I noticed. He was completely, hopelessly underwater. He was ruined. And Chloe. She wasn't just a bored, rich wife. She'd launched a disastrous fashion line that Marcus had refused to fund. She was drowning in personal debt and about to be exposed by her creditors. This whole thing, Villa Sol. It wasn't a plan to get rich. It was a plan to stay rich. They weren't running to a new life. They were running from their failures. They were going to burn us, our reputations, our companies, our credit, to the ground to cover their own incompetence. That hit me harder than the affair. He wasn't just betraying me, he was failing. He had failed spectacularly, and instead of facing it, he was going to make me pay for it. He was going to use the empire I built as fuel to burn down his own mistakes. I'd spent weeks feeling heartbroken. Now I just felt insulted. "So, they're rats," I said, the words tasting like acid. "Rats trying to flee a ship they set on fire, and they're planning one last party on the deck." "Exactly," Marcus said. His voice was all business. "So we let them have it. Your villa, Maya. You're in tech. What's your security setup?" A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first real, non-performative smile I'd had in a month. "He thinks it's an exaggeration," I said. "He always called it my paranoid streak. When I had this place built, I didn't just install cameras. I installed a data center. I walked over to a blank wall in my office, a seamless panel of polished teak. I pressed my palm against a spot no one else knew about. There was a soft hiss of hydraulics. The wall slid open. Behind it was a steel door. Fingerprint access. "I have a control room," I said, walking inside. "In the basement, encased in concrete, it has its own power, its own fiber line. It's a panic room, but he thinks it's just a server closet." I sat down in the chair in front of the bank of monitors. "And it doesn't just record, Marcus. It streams. Every camera, every microphone, the terrace, the living room, the bedrooms, the office." I clicked a few keys. The screens flickered to life. My empty house stared back at me. "He doesn't know it exists," I whispered. "He has no idea that I can hear every word said on that terrace. He thinks my key just opens the door. He doesn't know it's the key to his own prison." Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was pure, cold strategy. "They're going to walk right into a recording studio," he said. "They're going to toast to their own crimes. They're going to detail their entire fraud, all while thinking we're halfway across the world." "Yes," I said, "they are." "Good," he said. "Don't go to Sedona. Tell him you're leaving. We'll both leave. And on Friday night, he'll bring her to your villa. And we won't be in Singapore or Sedona." I knew exactly what he was going to say. "We'll be in the control room." The next 2 days were the strangest, quietest war I've ever fought. It was all about logistics. I packed a suitcase for Sedona. I folded clothes I had no intention of wearing. I bought a new face mask for the spa trip. Every move was a performance. Declan was buoyant. He was light, happy, whistling as he made his coffee. He was so relieved I was taking care of myself. He was so excited to have me gone. He was so stupid. He thought he was closing a deal. He had no idea I was building a case. My time was split. Half of it was spent playing the part of the blissfully ignorant, overworked wife. I'd complain about my flight time. I'd ask him if he was sure he could handle everything while I was gone. He'd pat my hand and tell me not to worry about a single thing, that he had it all covered. The other half of my time was spent in my control room, my server closet. The door would hiss shut behind me, and I was back in the command center. I wasn't a wife. I was a general. Marcus and I were in constant, encrypted contact. We weren't just planning to catch them. We were planning to end them. He had a forensic accounting team, the best in the world, already tracing the flow of money. They were watching the Villa Sol account in the Caymans, just waiting. He'd explained that catching them in the act was one thing, but proving intent to defraud was another. We needed them to confess. We needed them to articulate the entire plan. Out loud, where my microphones could pick it up. And even more, we needed them to push the button. My legal team was on standby. I'd had a quiet, brutal meeting with my lawyers, a team I'd had on retainer for my company for years. I showed them the preliminary evidence, the photos, the account numbers. They were horrified. And then they were angry. They drew up the emergency injunctions. They prepared the massive civil suit for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy. Everything was drafted, signed, and ready to be filed electronically the second I gave the word. The plan was simple, and it was ruthless. Friday would begin. I would leave for Sedona. Declan would kiss me goodbye at the door. I would drive my car to a secure garage in Century City where Marcus would be waiting. We would switch to one of his anonymous cars and, using a service entrance, drive back to my villa. We would enter through the basement, through a separate access point, and lock ourselves in the control room. Then, we'd wait. Declan would use my key. He and Chloe would arrive. thinking they had the entire world to themselves. They would drink my champagne, they would swim in my pool, and they would celebrate their victory. And at some point, high on their own brilliance, they would open their laptops. They would log into their various accounts, and they would initiate the final massive wire transfers that would drain my accounts and Marcus's. That was the trap. Marcus's team, watching the offshore account, would see the incoming transfers. My team, watching my business accounts, would see the outgoing ones. The moment those transfers were initiated, it was wire fraud. It was concrete, irrefutable, and happening in real time. We wouldn't just have their confession on tape. We would have the crime itself, recorded as it happened while they were trespassing in my house. Thursday night was the last time I slept in my own bed with him. I lay there, feeling the warmth from his back, and I felt nothing. It was like lying next to a stranger, a dangerous stranger. He fell asleep in minutes, completely at peace. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just ready. Friday morning, I zipped up my suitcase. He carried it to the door for me. He pulled me into a long hug, telling me to have a wonderful, relaxing trip, and that he loved me. I looked him right in the eye. I'd practiced this. I forced a small, tired smile. I told him, I know. You just be good. He laughed. He thought I was making a joke. I got in my car. I pulled down the long, winding driveway. I watched him in the rearview mirror, waving, my master key in his pocket. He looked so happy, so free. I turned onto the Pacific Coast Highway. I didn't drive toward the airport. I drove towards Century City. The plan was in motion. The trap was set. The doors were about to close, and they were the ones who were going to lock them. The drive back to my own home, hidden in the back of an Escalade with tinted windows, was the most surreal moment of my life. We slipped in through the garage, a separate entrance to the basement that even Declan didn't know I used. The heavy steel door of the control room hissed shut behind us, and the sound echoed in the small, concrete-encased space. And then, we were in. The room was cold. It was kept at a perfect 68 degrees for the servers that ran my life. The only light came from the wall of monitors, a dozen different angles of my beautiful, empty house, glowing in the late afternoon sun. The pool sparkled. The glass walls reflected the ocean. It looked like a postcard from a life that was already over. Marcus sat in the other high-back chair. He didn't speak. He just watched. We were two ghosts, haunting our own lives. The silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was just the low electronic hum of the servers, the quiet click, click, click of Marcus typing on a laptop he'd brought, monitoring the offshore accounts. My entire world had shrunk to this dark, cold box. I watched the sun begin to set on the monitors. The sky over the Pacific turned from blue to a brilliant burning orange and purple. It was the kind of sunset Declan and I used to watch from the terrace, the kind we'd toast to. I felt a sudden, sharp pang, not of sadness, but of disgust. That he had taken that too, that he had poisoned every memory. I thought I would be a wreck. I thought my hands would be shaking, that I'd be crying. But I wasn't. I was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a stage. It was a trap. And the actors were about to arrive. At 7:14 p.m., my phone, plugged into the console, buzzed. A notification from the main gate's security log. Master key. Access granted. "He's here," I said. It came out as a whisper. Marcus just nodded. He put his laptop down. On screen, a sleek, black car I didn't recognize, Chloe's, no doubt, glided up the driveway. My stomach tightened. This was it. The show was beginning. They got out. He was in a designer suit. She was in a dress that looked like liquid gold. They were laughing. They looked radiant, like a power couple on their way to a premiere. He used my key to open my front door. The sound of the high-tech lock disengaging, audible through the crisp audio feed, felt like a violation. They walked into the great room, and the first thing I heard was her voice, bouncing off my marble floors. She said it was beautiful, even more beautiful than his photos. He laughed. He told her. He told her it had good bones, but that I had no real taste, that I had made it cold. He said, "Just wait until you see what we build." I just stared at the screen. not cold, smart. He walked to the bar, my bar, and pulled out the bottle of champagne I'd been saving. The really expensive stuff. And that's when I saw it. The first crack in their perfect golden couple facade. She was nervous. Her laugh was too high. As he popped the cork, a sound that made me wince, she was pacing by the glass wall, looking out at the dark ocean. She kept wringing her hands. She asked him if he was sure I was gone. If he was positive, I was on the plane. She said, "Declan, I just have a bad feeling. What if she's smarter than you think?" My breath caught in my throat. He turned to her, and his face was not the face of a lover. It was annoyed, condescending. He told her to relax. He said I was. Handled. He said I was a brilliant coder, but a trusting wife. He told her I believed every word he said because I needed to believe I had the perfect life. He said, "I've been managing her for years, Chloe. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. She is not a problem." He dismissed her fear, and he dismissed me. She didn't look convinced. She looked like an accomplice who was suddenly realizing she'd tied her fate to a man who was all confidence and no caution. Marcus and I locked eyes in the dark. We didn't have to say a word. Their alliance wasn't strong. It was brittle. It was built on his arrogance and her desperation. They weren't partners. They were just co-conspirators. And they were already beginning to doubt each other. On the screen, Declan handed her a glass of champagne. He raised his. "To Vila Sol," he said, his voice booming with fake confidence. "To our new beginning." They clinked glasses. I sat back in the chair, in the cold, dark room. I watched the man I'd married toast to my destruction, using a memory he'd stolen from me. The performance was over. The trap was sprung, and they had no idea they were already caught. They drank. They drank a lot. They moved from the great room to the terrace, sitting on my furniture overlooking my ocean. And as the champagne loosened their tongues, the real poison came out. They started bragging. It was almost pathetic. He told her how he'd siphoned money for months, using the fund as a perfect cover. He laughed about the Charles text. He said he knew I'd seen it, and he'd turned it into his advantage, using my suspicion as the very reason I needed to go to Sedona, to de-stress. He was so proud of himself. He'd painted me as a high-strung, paranoid woman, and then used that painting to get me out of the house so he could rob me blind. Chloe was just as bad. She mocked Marcus. She called him a cold, calculating machine, but one she'd easily fooled. She detailed how she'd used his own corporate speak against him, how she'd buried her transfers in slush funds he never checked. And then they opened their laptops. The mood shifted. It was business. "Okay," Declan said, his voice crisp. "The accounts are primed. My last transfer request went through my system this afternoon. Yours?" "All set," she said. "Marcus is wheels up over the Pacific. We have a clear window. Let's drain them. Let's go." I watched them, side by side, their faces illuminated by the glow of their screens. In the control room, my own laptop lit up, a secure message from my forensic team. We see the login. He's in. He's staging the final transfer. Simultaneously, Marcus's laptop pinged. She's active. She's moving the assets. On the terrace, I heard Declan say, "On 3. 1, 2, 3, execute." I heard the click of his trackpad, a tiny sound amplified by the sensitive microphones. "Done," he breathed. "It's gone. Oh my God, Chloe. It's done." "Mine too," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "It's all moving. It's all going to Vila Sol." They didn't just sit there. They jumped up. He grabbed her. He kissed her. A deep, victorious kiss. They were screaming, laughing, holding each other. "We did it! We're free! We're rich!" he yelled out into the night. In the control room, my team sent a single word. "Confirmed. Wire fraud complete." Marcus looked at me. His face was a mask of cold fury. He just nodded. Once. The show was over. Declan and Chloe were still celebrating. He'd poured more champagne, his hands shaking this time. They stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out at the dark water, their backs to the house. They were planning their new life. Geneva, they decided, or maybe Dubai, somewhere they could never be touched. I leaned forward. My hand was perfectly steady. I pressed the small black button on the console, the one marked Terrace Intercom. A soft chime echoed across the patio. I took a breath. I kept my voice perfectly level, almost friendly. Declan, Chloe. On the monitor, I watched them freeze. Their shoulders went rigid. They didn't turn around. I hope the champagne is cold, I said. The panic was instantaneous. It was the most primal thing I've ever seen. Chloe screamed. She dropped her glass and it shattered on the stone. Declan spun around, his face white, his eyes wide with a terror that was almost comical. He was looking for me. He was looking everywhere. "Where are you, Maya?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Right here," I said, my voice now booming through the entire house. The great room, the kitchen, the bedrooms. "I'm everywhere." They scrambled. They were like rats in a box. They ran for the sliding glass door to the great room. Declan fumbled with the handle. It wouldn't budge. He pulled harder. "It's locked! She locked it!" He didn't know the half of it. I pressed another button on my console. A heavy, satisfying thud echoed from the speakers. The magnetic locks on every single door and gate on the property. They ran to the other side of the terrace, to the stairs leading down to the pool. A steel gate, one he'd always found tacky, had slid silently shut. They were trapped. On my terrace, 20 stories above the rocks. Chloe was sobbing, pounding on the glass. "Let us out! Let us out!" Declan just stood there, in the middle of the patio, his laptop still open on the table, displaying the proof of his crime. He looked up, his eyes scanning, and he finally saw it. A small, dark-tinted security dome in the corner of the eaves. The camera. He stared right at it. Right at me. His mouth was open. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was the hollowed-out look of a man who had just realized the game was over, and he'd been playing against a master. In the control room, Marcus and I just sat in the dark. We didn't move. We just watched. We watched the pure, unadulterated terror as they realized the trap hadn't just been set. It had been closed. We left them there. We didn't go up. We didn't confront them. There was no screaming match, no satisfying scene where I got to slap him. That's not what this was about. We just sat in the dark, in the cold, and watched. We watched them for an entire hour. An hour of pure, distilled panic. We watched Declan, the ideas guy, try to pry open a magnetically sealed door with a champagne holder. We watched Chloe collapse into a sobbing heap on the patio furniture, her gold dress looking like a crumpled wrapper. We watched his arrogance curdle into desperation, and her desperation turn into blame. We heard them start to turn on each other. "This was your plan!" she screamed at him. "You said she was stupid. You said she was handled." And he just stared at the camera, his face slack, finally understanding. He'd been played. We both had. After an hour, when they were exhausted, just sitting in silence on opposite ends of the terrace, I pressed another button, the heavy thud of the magnetic locks disengaging. We watched on the monitor as Declan cautiously tried the door. It slid open. They didn't even look at each other. They just ran. They grabbed their laptops and they ran out the front door to their car and disappeared down the driveway. We let them go. There was nowhere for them to run to. Their Villa Sol account, it had been frozen by Marcus's team the instant the transfer was complete. Long before they'd even finished their toast, the money was already locked down, flagged for fraud. They ran away with nothing. We just sat there in the dark. Marcus was the first to speak. He just said, "It's done." He left. I stayed in that control room until the sun came up. I watched the sunrise on the monitors, the same beautiful burning orange as the night before. But this time, it felt clean. The next morning, the consequences were not loud or dramatic. They were quiet and fast and legal. They were brutal. At 9 a.m., my lawyers filed the divorce papers and the massive civil suit for fraud. Marcus's team did the same. The core evidence, the hours of high-definition, crystal-clear audio and video recordings, the recordings of them bragging, the recordings of them admitting to everything, the recordings of them on my property, executing the wire fraud. It was a perfect airtight case. Declan was finished. He was publicly humiliated and financially obliterated. His reputation as an investment guy was, well, you can't have a reputation when you're a documented fraud. He lost everything in the settlement. He lost the right to ever be near my company again. He's a ghost. Chloe was decimated by Marcus. She was exposed as a co-conspirator. The debts she'd been running from came crashing down. I got every single cent back. But the final twist, the part I'm left with, it's not the money. I already had money. The victory wasn't about the bank account. It was about the moment I was sitting in that dark room, watching the man who'd broken my heart, and I realized I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't even angry. I just felt nothing. The love had been dead for a long time. This was just closing a bad deal. My revenge wasn't in screaming, it was in watching. It was in my silence, my planning, my control. He thought my intelligence was limited to code. He thought my paranoid streak, my server room, he thought it was a weakness. But it was my weapon. I sold the villa. I couldn't look at that terrace again. I took my company and I started a new division, a private consultancy focused on forensic accounting and financial protection, specifically for women. I help other women spot the Declans of the world. I teach them how to build their own control rooms. My name is Maya, and I learned that the best way to deal with a rat in your house isn't to chase it. It's to let it walk right into the trap it thinks it's set. That's my story. The whole thing. It's a lot to hold on to alone. And telling it, finally, feels like I can finally let it go. Thank you for listening. I'm sitting here in my new office in downtown LA, and it feels a world away from that villa. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Let me know in the comments what city you're in, just so I know I'm not the only one. And if you want to hear more stories about survival and about fighting back, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because there are a lot of us out here, and we're not stupid, and we're not handled.